Hello everyone and welcome back to another and the final episode of the AFL Fantasy Head2Head series for 2025. I'm your host Bales and you can find me at BAILSDT across the socials, and this is episode 12, as I said, the final one. If you haven't checked out the other 11 episodes, make sure you do. Still got a couple of weeks to catch up on the 12, and you pretty much can smash them out in a few hours with all the 12. Plenty of relevant players and a heap of special guests jumping on to chat about a lot of relevant players. And today we'll be talking about two of the premium rucks at the very top of the tree. We chatted about with Tom de Koning and Kieran Briggs on the Monday with MJ. And now we'll be touching on another two in Tristan Xerri and Tim English, while also quickly touching on Ryan Marshall and Max Gawn. And joining me is another special guest and another one of our favourites getting here at the AFL Fantasy Fanatics. Is always generous with his time to jump on with us throughout the season. He was on the pod with us on Sunday just gone. It is Liam from Free Kick. Liam, mate, how are you?
Very good, thanks, Bales. Enjoying kind of getting to the interesting bit of the pre-season. I've actually got a full 30-man squad now, which for anyone that's been following me around on podcasts and socials has not been the given. So I have at least enjoyed most of my time. I knew that rucks were going to be a tough pick, but I haven't locked myself into any up until very, very recently.
Yeah, exactly. These couple of weeks is where you, as you say, the squad starts taking shape. People that haven't had a team or had a squad of 30 filled out start filling those bits in. And we're watching now Sam Davidson. I tell you what, he might be an F6, but we'll see. But we're not going to be talking about him today. He'll be chatted about, I'm sure, another podcast. But we are chatting about Tristan Xerri and Tim English, and we always start with a guest. But as Liam suggested pre-pod, and I think it's a good idea, we'll start off with Tristan Xerri, who I'll be covering, and Liam will be taking Tim English, and we'll be leading that into the Tim English discussion, and also quickly touching on, as I said, Marshall and Max Gawn. So we'll start off with the prices and the ownership of these two players. So Tristan Xerri is one of the most expensive players in the game at the moment. He's the second most expensive at 1.18 million. And he's after 114.5 average from his 23 games last year. Obviously a massive breakout for him, but he is owned by a massive 53.4%. Couple of percent down the last few days. So a few people starting to call on Tristan Xerri with the tougher run, which we'll be chatting about as well. And then Tim English, who has been in a few sides of the last week or so with people going a bit cheaper. English 1.07 million, 104.6 average from his 22 games. So down on the massive year of over 115 the year before. And he's got a current ownership of 8.2%. So quite a unique there as well. So Tristan Xerri, as we said, last year, massive year, averaging over 114 with 114.5. And yeah, his start of the year was a bit quieter. A few lower scores there with a couple of 80s and a 57 against Jared Witts. But from after his bye, so from round 13 onwards, he had obviously a lot of massive scores, including those three scores over 150 in a row. 12 games, average of 125.4 from 84% time on ground. That's including some scores of a 129, 129, 118, 124, 156, 150, 168, 122. And there was only 4 games I didn't reference there, which was a 107, 99, 94, and a 109 in the final game of the season. So absolutely insane end to the year with all those massive scores. And the big reason for that was we saw the uptick in his marks and his touches around the ground. So a lot of games at the start of the year, he didn't have many marks. So he only had one game where he had over 5 marks in the first, before his bye, which funny enough was in round 1 against GWS, where he actually kicked a goal or so as well, and did a lot of his damage through getting the ball actually. So it was actually after his bye, as I said, where he got his marks. So he had a few games there of over 5, and those games where he went over 150, he took 5, 6, and 6 marks. His tackles, as we know, were up, but he only had the 2 games over 10 tackles before the bye. Post the bye, he had 5 of those games, 4 of them being 10 tackles, another one being 12 tackles. So for a ruckman, though, that's just insane numbers. And if you're looking ahead to this year, he doesn't have any competition. He's the number 1 ruck. Obviously, Goad's getting a lot of buzz around North Melbourne, but I don't see him playing as much, especially to start the year. So Tristan Xerri is the number 1 ruck, and there's no question about that. The tough sticking point with him, and what a few people are not starting him, is that early run he's got. And Liam, I'm interested to get your thoughts on this early run. So Tristan Xerri starts off with Tim English in round 1, which is a good matchup on paper. Then he goes into Melbourne and Max Gawn. Then he goes to Riley O'Brien. Don't see it as tough of a matchup, but it is at Adelaide Oval, so it could be a bit trickier there. Sydney at Marvel, obviously Brodie Grundy, Jared Witts, and that's at Barossa Park as well. First game at the Barossa this year. So Jared Witts there. And then goes into a better run after that. But it's those 4 games in a row that are tricky. So, Liam, what do you make of those four fixtures from rounds 2 to 5? Do you see it being a difficult run for Tristan Xerri, who can get his points around tackles, or what do you think of it?
Yeah, look, I'm pretty wary. I just think that the run that you described in the back half of last year is pretty spectacular, and Jaiden Popovsky has been pretty vocal in talking about his points at stoppages was insane, a near record level in the back half of the year. And I think there's a stat that I really want to talk about, which often predicts good ruck scoring, and that's ruck contests themselves. Now, I don't know if anyone else has had a look at this, but for the entire year last year, North Melbourne averaged 96. Final 10 games of last year, they averaged 100. And the final 5 games, they averaged 105. Really does tell you a lot about what game style was happening at North Melbourne last year. Now, I haven't managed to find a specific trend across the league to say that there's ball ruck contests either at the beginning of the year, later in the year. But I do just think that level, that number, like North Melbourne in the final 5 games of the season had the second highest number of ruck contests per game, combined with what I think will be a more competitive midfield and probably a lower likelihood that Tristan Xerri is going to get those repeat tackles that he would get. He would get hard, or he would get a ruck hard or get hand pass it, then tackle the bloke that he'd hand pass it to. I just don't know if that 115, 116 is going to be sustainable to start the year, particularly considering that as well in that hard run that he's got. Melbourne are a relatively low ruck contest team. Now, that doesn't apply for Adelaide, which is his round 3 matchup. Yeah, round 3 matchup. Adelaide are 3rd highest in the competition, but then he runs into Sydney as well. So that's Grundy combined with another bottom 4 side for ruck contest per game. I'm wary. But basically sum up a whole bunch of waffling on stats. I'm pretty wary that he's not going to be able to match that price early to start the year.
Yeah, and I guess with a lot of teams, well, currently I've got Brayshaw and Dawson, for example, sitting at M1 and M2. And I think a few people might go down a path of starting at least one of these big mids and potentially 2. And then if they start a Shizu in defence, there's a couple of captain options already. And I guess people are going, I want Xerri in my team to start as a captain option. And obviously I see that. But the thing that I've been thinking about, I've had Xerri locked in for most of the preseason. Obviously I've been set and forget. But as the longer the preseason's gone on, obviously Marshall injury, and obviously we'll touch on him, and then also here in the comments about Gawn and potential rest and stuff, it's gone more towards having a value. And Tom De Koning, who with Pitney out, looks like he'll be that main ruck at least to start the season. So longer it's gone on, I've gone more to the value because I think we have captain options elsewhere. And are we really going to be captaining Tristan Xerri against Melbourne, against Adelaide, against Sydney, against Gold Coast? The Adelaide game I could see an argument for, and obviously round 1, yes, but rounds 2, 4, and 5, I probably won't be putting the captaincy on him, which I guess begs the question, if you're not going to be putting your most expensive player captain in 3 of the first 5 rounds, is there much use of you starting him, or do you go for another option? Would you be agreeing with that in that sentiment, or do you think with the best 18, if you've got other options, you can still just lock Xerri in and have him there regardless?
I'm of the opinion that if you're picking someone priced that much, you still want to see some value, and part of the value prop as well of picking a player who's averaged over 115 last year and had it over 125 average in the latter half of the year is the ability to put the captaincy on him. I would also say that, there's a case to be made that by having Tristan Xerri, you're saving yourself having to trade any other ruck in, which I completely understand. And then I think the question becomes, if you're not starting him, start to map out like how many rookies, how many mid-prices have you got in your team? how many would you need to not fail, not get injured, such that by the time his bye rolls around, or let's say we get to week 10, you're going to probably want to trade in Tristan Xerri? Like round 10, he goes into Richmond, then Collingwood, then his bye, then West Coast, Fremantle, Carlton, Hawthorn, Western Bulldogs, which is a stellar run for rucks.
That's a great run, yeah.
That's the time. So if you're not starting him, which I'm currently considering doing, I need to be confident that my team is set up in a way that if we do get to that weeks 8, 9, and 10 start of a good run, I'm going to be able to bring him in as a premium upgrade, as probably one of my first, say, half handful of upgrades in season.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess obviously the other side of the argument is, yes, he's got that tough run to start, but if you have him in your team, you'll get that. You save your trade, you'll have that good run earlier. And even after round 5, he goes into an easier run anyway. I know Brisbane's in there, which is a tougher matchup, but it saves you a trade. And obviously the whole thing of setting and forgetting your ruck lineup is you don't have to worry about trades. Obviously, it's different this year. We're probably going to go one big guy, one value. And obviously, a lot of people are going that way in the moment. But yeah, I think that I am starting to warm to maybe not starting him and going for one of these other guys, and potentially having the next guy that we'll move on to now, maybe even starting a guy like a Tim English at R1. So, Liam, why should we be picking Tim English in our AFL Fantasy sides for Classic for 2025? And can we start him as our R1, or is he more of an R2?
Well, I think if you're picking him, I think you're probably picking him R1 because that's a lot of cash committed to one line in a line where I do think there are some value options and potentially a couple of rookies that you're trying to fill R2s through 4, or let's say call utility R4. So I think the headline item is we all know that Tim English had an incredible 2023, that 118 average. He comes in as the most expensive player last year. I think that's a massive benefit for him. And then I think we all know about his fall from grace. Now, he's gone from 118 down to effectively 104 average. And you've got to ask yourself kind of what's caused that. And there've been several mooted theories. And I think it's a combination of a lot of them. I would say that the main thing was the increased kind of concentration of points in that midfield through Libba, Bont, and then Treloar. Treloar's breakout, you can call the bloke who was as old as Adam Treloar a breakout at the Western Bulldogs. Probably did eat away at some of the stoppage and transition points that Tim English would typically score. The other reason that people want to talk about is the new ruck rules. And he's not able to extend and push. Other rucks are able to push during a ruck contest, block him out. He's not exactly known for his strength. Now, in thinking about how he might be able to counter that, let's put it down to you need to spend more time in the gym this off season, and if anything of the first half of the preseason game, which is just happening at the moment with Hawthorn, he's looking a little stronger. He's not looking as dominated by Lloyd Meek. I think that gives him some good hope to maybe get a handful, 3-4 extra stoppage points per game. And then the final one that I wanted to discuss was just the emergence of Sam Darcy as a ruck option for the Bulldogs. Now, I think that this year, particularly Jamara Ugle-Hagen's continued issues, and the fact that he may have a pretty long timeline before he returns to the team forward at the Western Bulldogs, which I think means that Tim English does spend more time in the ruck and more ruck contests rucking, because Sam Darcy would often get the opportunity to ruck a fair bit of the ground. I think that Darcy probably needs to spend some more time near goal and be a target for kicks inside 50 as opposed to trying to win an at-ruck contest. So I think all those factors combined mean that there's a pretty solid case for starting English. I think the one thing I have to mention is obviously if you're spending up on him, most people are probably doing it at R1 because he's extremely expensive already. The second thing is his run still isn't spectacular. Like North were not an easy ruck matchup, final 10 games of last year. Goes into Collingwood, which not exactly ideal for him. He did score 116 against them last year.
it could be better this year, obviously, with if Mason Cox didn't start in the year, maybe just Darcy Cameron, it makes it a little bit easier.
Potentially a little bit easier, but I also think that comes down to the way that Collingwood do play the game, and they're really trying to zip around you, not go for full contest the whole time. Or at least that's how they had to evolve as teams evolved to the way that Collingwood won their premiership in 2023. And so that first two ruck matchups aren't ideal. And then before his bye, he does also have Brisbane, St Kilda, and the Gold Coast Suns, who are all tough, and Essendon, who are all tough matchups for rucks. And I think particularly Essendon comes down to they are a low ruck contest team. And then for Brisbane, they are not exactly that same ruck contest problem. Their thing is Oscar McInerney is an absolute slab of bricks and very hard to move off the spot, and is a very good negating ruck. So I think, though, that if you combine kind of the positives and the negatives, I think that Tim English is someone who's very capable of a 110 to 112 average this year, probably not able to reach those same 118 heights of 2023. And given he's priced out of 104, I think that's enough value. Like if we considered the same thing for a midfielder, 104 going up those 8 points and becoming an uber primo would be enough for us typically. I think the same applies to English.
Yeah, and the thing that I've noticed as well in even the game against Meek, obviously they're watching now, and last game against Essendon, is English's pack marks I've seen a few of them. There was one against Essendon, and that was in the wet as well that he took that, and that looked good. And he took 2 in the first half against Meek in big contests. And don't get me wrong, we've seen that from English every now and again, but those pack marks, they seem to be a bit more regular even than 2 games we've seen. So whether that's going to be a regular occurrence, or if it's just in the preseason, he's got those hands, and then maybe in the season they're not as good. But that could be a little bit of upside as well with the contested marks. And yeah, even though the matchups are tougher, we know that English's thing isn't winning the hitouts. It's about his transitional points, in being the extra midfielder. And if he's that with no Treloar, I don't exactly know if Ed Richards is going to be missing any time or anything like that, but obviously he's not playing today. So if there's a few of those mids missing, you expect English to get some more of those transition points. I know he got a +6 day as well from kicking as well. So clearly that's what English does. He likes getting those +6s. So I think there is definitely where he can go 110. But I guess that obviously we normally focus on the head-to-head episodes as 2 rucks, but I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the other 2 quote-unquote set and forget rucks, in a Rowan Marshall and a Max Gawn. And we'll start off quickly with Rowan Marshall. Obviously he's had the pelvis injuries. He obviously hasn't been training much, but Ross Lyon has said he's going to be playing in round 1, so we'll have to see. But can you spend 1.2 million on a guy that's had a limited preseason, or do you think it's just you've got to go someone that's at least had a preseason?
Yeah, look, I think the no preseason really hurts. I think you could have made a case for it when we were really concerned that we would have almost no ruck value options. Tom De Koning was not going to be playing full-time ruck. This was when we were discussing the potential of doing this episode less than half a week ago. I think you could have made a case if we'd at least seen one preseason game with Marshall and potentially Harry Boyd, getting a sense of whether or not they'd both be playing together or it'd be full-time Romar. But even if they did have Romar playing sometime forward, in the 4 games last year where he had someone else on the team ruck above 30%, and 3 of those 4 times it was actually a dedicated, like an actual ruck in Hayes or Campbell, he still averaged 119.5. So he is extremely adept at scoring, even when there are other rucks in the team or when he's drifting forward. I think just given the unknowns and the fact he's the most expensive player in the game, make him a really tough player to pick. It would have been a far more fascinating conversation if he just had just a little bit more time, or even just a full preseason, and we were just questioning whether or not Boyd would play and how much.
Yeah, exactly. I just think with Marshall, when you're paying for the most expensive player in the game, 1.2 million and not much for a preseason, I just don't think we can go there. And it sucks because we're talking about Cherry's early run. Marshall's run is great. Like, he's got Adelaide, Geelong, Richmond, Port, GWS and Bulldogs. And obviously that round 2 and 3 with Geelong and Richmond, they're prime captain, vice-captain options. They're 2 great ruck matchups. So it is unfortunate because obviously I had him in my team originally, but I just don't think we can start him. And before we wrap up the episode, obviously Max Gawn as well is the other one. I'm concerned hearing these comments from Troy Chaplin saying that they've now got a better ruck depth, and they've got the ability to manage Gawn in-game or potentially a full-on rest. Or there's even going to be opportunities where Tom Campbell comes into the team for obviously portions. One, he'd probably get subbed out or someone else would be subbed out, but that's concern when I'm paying, again, $1.15 million when you look at Sheasel is the same price as a Gawn, and we know what Sheasel's. He's going to be in the team week in, week out. He's obviously going to be a mid. He's going to spend time for. But we know what we're going to get from Sheasel, whereas a Gawn, if he's resting in that, you don't want to force trade on a week when we're like, especially between round 5 and 10, where it's prime upgrade season when we're trying to do it. Would you be agreeing with that? And you'd be scared off by those comments?
I'm scared off by those comments, and I'm also scared off by the fact that he's in his probably his mid-30s at this point.
He's 34,
and
yeah.
Yes, okay, let's say that ruck timelines are a little different. That was his best season ever, and he's come at the age that he has. Now, it's the first time that he'd rucked full-time without Luke Jackson there since 2020. So he's definitely, we know that he's got it in him. I think both the comments about Campbell and the overall tools depth. And I also think that I would be shocked if Melbourne don't try and revert to more of their 2023, 2024 games. 2023, 2022 game style if they've got a fully healthy midfield. Now, that obviously remains to be seen. I don't know if we've seen a fully healthy combination. I don't know when we'll see a fully healthy combination of Viney, Clary, and Petrarca, who really have driven the scoring for a long time. But if they're looking to play that same game style, I would say those players are much more likely to score, and we may see a dip of Gawn back to his, let's say, 2022 levels, where he averaged 103.
Yeah, I think I agree with that as well. Beautiful. Well, that wraps up the episode. But before we do, as always, we pick between the two. So, Liam, if you had to pick between Tristan Xerri and Tim English, who would you pick? And then maybe how would you rank the four that we've talked about?
Yeah, I would be. At the moment, I think I'm leaning towards English more than Xerri. It's very close, but I'd go English, Xerri, and a bit of a gap. Now, I'm saying this having no idea what Rowan Marshall's going to look like. So I'd probably go Gawn, little gap to Marshall. But this is one of the toughest years to pick rucks. So I don't say that with much confidence, and I'm fully prepared to be wrong.
Yeah. I think I'm just leaning Xerri, but I am not closing the door for an English to potentially come in at R1 for me. And I know Mitch actually, fair enough, was the first one to really sort of bring it up that I heard, and Luke was giving him a bit of shit for it. But it definitely could be a bit of a play. And I've got English at 2, and then I think I've got Marshall at 3 just because I think he'll be better for the season, but that injury scares me. And then Gawn as well. He does have a good run from rounds 4 to 8, but I'm a bit concerned with those comments. So, but yeah, cool. Let us know in the comments below, guys, who you'd be picking between Xerri and English, and then let us know who you'd be picking out of the 4 of these premium rucks. And if you're going, maybe you're going full blown value, you're going Briggs and DeConing, who we picked in the last episode. Are you going one of these guys and one of those, or are you even tempted by like a Liam Reedy or someone at R2, which I think is a bit risky? But let us know what you guys are thinking there as well. But Liam, mate, thank you very much for jumping on the final episode of the Head2Head series for the season. Where can the people find you across the socials, and what can people be expecting for the remainder of the preseason, which isn't long, and then into the season proper?
Yeah, thanks, Bales. It feels like there's a certain roundness to everything. I was on the first head-to-head episode that you ever recorded, and I'm on the last for this season. So that's a nice, tidy finish. You can find me on all the socials at Liam AFLW Fantasy. For the rest of the preseason, this is the end of a block of recording about 5 different podcasts. So, look, I don't know if I'm going to be on anything else. At this stage, I'm committed to nothing, and that's absolutely okay with me, such as the life of a free agent. And I'm sure you'll hear from me if you're playing AFLW Fantasy kind of as we get closer towards the season, maybe when we start to actually get an announcement on when the season will start, you'll start to hear the green shoots of AFLW popping up.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure we'll get you on a couple of times throughout the season as well, mate. So, yeah, beautiful. Mate, thanks very much for jumping on. And you can find me at BAILSDT across the socials, and you can find us at AFL Fantasy Fans on Twitter as well. thank you to all the 12 guests, they've jumped on through this series. It's been fantastic to get all the guest opinions on these players and plenty of relevant players that we've discussed here as well. And hopefully you guys have enjoyed the head-to-head series. And also let me know what you guys have thought of the series and any sort of improvements, additions, whatever you guys would like to think. Let us know in the comments. And also make sure you go and jump over to our Patreon, patreon.com/AFL Fantasy Fanatics to get some more bonus and exclusive content, or just want to help support us, or do both of those things. And there's a cash league as well for all the Patreon members. The more people that jump in, the bigger the cash prize. So make sure you guys get involved in that. You've got to be in the league, though, before round 1. So you still got a couple of weeks to go. Make sure you guys sign up at patreon.com/AFL Fantasy Fanatics. And the link is in the paid members part where you guys can jump in that league. But thanks everyone that tuned in. As always, we're back on Sunday night for our usual pod, wrapping up all of the Amy Community Series games. And make sure you check out our episode yesterday with Selby, chatting all things strategy and the hot topics ahead of the season. It was good to get the guy on to chat through a few of those things. But thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys in the next video. So we're out. Cheers.